In the aftermath of World War II, the world was forced to reckon with the horrors of the Nazi regime, particularly the concentration camps that had become industrial centers of death. Among these, Ravensbrück stood out, not for the number of lives lost, but for being the primary camp for women. It was here that Dorothea Binz, a female SS officer, rose through the ranks and became infamous for her sadism and cruelty. Her eventual capture, trial, and execution by hanging in 1947 were swift and severe. But was it justified? This question continues to evoke fierce debate, touching on the nature of justice, the role of women in the Nazi hierarchy, and the ethics of capital punishment. This video explores Dorothea Binz's crimes, the context in which they were committed, and the legal and moral arguments surrounding her execution, seeking to evaluate whether her hanging was truly justified. Ravensbrück concentration camp, located north of Berlin, was established in 1939 exclusively for women. Over 130,000 women and children passed through its gates before the war ended. The camp served as a site for forced labor, inhumane medical experiments, and systematic abuse. Unlike Auschwitz or Dachau, Ravensbrück was smaller in scale, but no less brutal. It became a center of female perpetration within the Nazi system, with hundreds of women serving as guards, known as Aufseherinnen. These female guards were trained in a system that encouraged violence and complete submission to Nazi ideology. They wielded unchecked power over inmates, many of whom were political prisoners, Jews, Romani, or simply deemed undesirable. Among the most notorious of these women was Dorothea Binz. Born in 1920 in Fürsterei-Dusterleck, Germany, Binz came from a modest background. She joined the SS staff at Ravensbrück in 1939 as a kitchen worker and quickly advanced to become deputy chief wardress. By 1943, she was effectively overseeing the entire camp's female guard system. Binz's cruelty was not bureaucratic or distant, it was hands-on and personal. Survivors recalled her walking through the camp with a whip, selecting prisoners for punishment or execution without cause. She was known to beat women to death or oversee their torture with sadistic delight. Her involvement in selections for gas chambers and execution squads cemented her reputation as one of the most feared individuals in the camp. Unlike some who claimed ignorance, Binz made no effort to hide her actions. Witnesses described her as proud of her role, often training new guards in methods of psychological and physical terror. Her presence instilled fear not only in prisoners, but also among junior staff. She had internalized Nazi ideology to the point of zealotry, making her a central figure in the machinery of cruelty that operated at Ravensbrück. Her rise, actions, and unrepentant stance made her stand out even among other female guards, a key reason why her trial and subsequent execution drew such attention in post-war justice. After the fall of Nazi Germany in 1945, Dorothea Binz attempted to flee but was soon captured by Allied forces. She was identified by survivors and fellow staff as one of the most brutal figures at Ravensbrück. Her notoriety ensured that she would not be overlooked in the wave of post-war tribunals. Binz was tried in 1947 during the Hamburg-Ravensbrück trials, a series of military tribunals conducted by the British. These trials focused specifically on crimes committed at Ravensbrück and were part of the broader Allied effort to prosecute Nazi war crimes under international law. Binz faced charges of war crimes, including torture, murder, and abuse of power. The testimonies against her were overwhelming. Survivors detailed beatings, shootings, and her cold enthusiasm for selections and punishments. Unlike some defendants who showed remorse or claimed to be following orders, Binz remained defiant. Her cold demeanor during the trial and lack of emotion only reinforced her image as a remorseless executioner. She was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The execution took place on May 2, 1947, at Hamelin Prison, where many Nazi war criminals met their end. She was 26 years old. According to witnesses, she remained composed to the end, reportedly showing no fear as she ascended the scaffold. Her execution was carried out swiftly, alongside several other convicted female guards. The public reaction was largely supportive. Many saw her death as a form of justice, not just for her crimes, but as a symbol of accountability for female perpetrators of Nazi atrocities. Supporters of Dorothea Binz's execution argue that it was not only lawful but morally necessary. Her crimes were not abstract or administrative. They were direct, personal, and sadistic. Survivors described how she personally beat women, sometimes to death, and derived pleasure from inflicting pain. In such cases, the line between obedience and personal cruelty disappears. She was not simply following orders, she was enforcing terror by choice and initiative. Under the Nuremberg principles, individuals can be held personally responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity, even if they acted within a state apparatus. Binz's trial met the standards of international law at the time. The evidence was clear, the testimonies were extensive, and she was given the opportunity to defend herself. The rule of law, not vengeance, was the basis of her conviction. Some argue that capital punishment, in cases like this, serves a broader symbolic function. Binz had become the face of female cruelty in the camps, a role model for others in institutional brutality. Executing her was not merely about punishing her, it was about making a public statement that the world would not tolerate such behavior, regardless of gender or rank. Finally, the sheer scale and severity of the suffering at Ravensbrück demanded a strong response. Thousands of women died in that camp under horrific conditions, and Binz was instrumental in that system. Her execution, to many, was the only proportionate response to the enormity of her crimes. Despite the gravity of her crimes, some critics have questioned whether Dorothea Binz's execution was truly just, or if it reflected a form of victor's justice. The post-war tribunals, while legally structured, operated in a politically charged atmosphere. There was immense public pressure to punish Nazi criminals swiftly and harshly. In such a climate, due process could be compromised, and the outcomes might be more about symbolism than fairness. Another layer of critique involves the gender dynamic. Binz, like Irma Grace, was one of the few women executed for war crimes. While their actions were undeniably brutal, male officers responsible for far greater death tolls were sometimes spared the death penalty. Some suggest that the executions of women like Binz were amplified for their shock value, because their crimes defied societal expectations of female behavior. There are also ethical objections to capital punishment itself. No matter how severe the crime, some believe that the state should not have the power to take a life. Life imprisonment could have ensured justice without mirroring the violence it sought to condemn. In this view, executing Binz did not elevate justice, it ended her life, but not the deeper systemic issues that enabled her cruelty. To assess whether Dorothea Binz's execution was justified, one must balance evidence, legal standards, and moral reasoning. The evidence of her crimes was overwhelming: multiple survivor testimonies, corroborated reports from camp staff, and her own lack of denial painted a clear picture of guilt. Legally, her trial followed the procedures established for war crimes prosecution, giving her representation, a formal indictment, and the right to defense. But legal justice is not the same as moral clarity. Was execution necessary, or would life imprisonment have sufficed? In a world still reeling from the Holocaust, justice was often synonymous with retribution. Binz's execution sent a message that those who inflict inhumanity, even young, low-ranking women, would be held accountable. Comparing her to others helps refine the judgment. Irma Grace, executed at age 22, and Maria Mandl both shared similar fates. Meanwhile, some male officers with more strategic responsibility received prison terms. The contrast suggests inconsistency, yet Binz's personal sadism arguably warranted the harshest penalty. In the end, while the use of the death penalty remains controversial, the justice system of the time deemed her crimes so severe, so intimate in their brutality, that no lesser sentence could match the scale of harm she inflicted. Dorothea Binz's pace has left a lasting imprint on how we understand female perpetrators, post-war justice, and the nature of evil. Her execution marked a turning point. It disrupted the stereotype of women solely as victims or passive supporters in wartime. Instead, Binz embodied the active participant, a woman who not only enabled atrocities but took pleasure in them. Historians and legal scholars continue to study her case as a benchmark in the development of international criminal law, especially regarding gender and personal accountability. She is frequently cited in discussions about how ordinary individuals can become agents of extraordinary cruelty. Public memory has preserved her name among the most notorious female Nazis, but also as a symbol of the justice that followed. Her execution became both a moral warning and a legal precedent, reminding the world that no rank, gender, or ideology can shield one from accountability when crimes against humanity are committed. Dorothea Binz was more than a cog in the Nazi machine. She was a willing architect of terror. Her execution reflected both justice and retribution. But as history judges her, we must ask, was her hanging a necessary reckoning with evil, or a reflection of the kind of justice we wanted to see?